Maravilla was part of the first wave of undocumented, unaccompanied children to come to the U.S. from Central America. Maravilla became a U.S. citizen at 27. In 2016, as a gesture of solidarity with his undocumented father, who uses Maravilla as his last name in his fake identity, Maravilla changed his birth name, Irvin Morrison, to Guadalupe Maravilla. Lupe has performed and presented his work extensively in venues such as the Whitney Museum of American Art, Metropolitan Museum of Art, ICA Miami, Queens Museum, Bronx Museum, El Museo del Barrio, Marte, El Salvador, Central American Biennial, the 10th Central American Biennial, the 11th Nicaraguan Biennial. This list is way too fucking long to go through. Awards and fellowships include Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship 2019, Soros Fellowship, Arts and Migration and Public Space 2019, MAP Fund Grant. Again, we'll be here for the entire hour if I go through this list. For the past 10 years, I've been lucky enough to call Lupe a close friend. During that time, I've had the joy of seeing his work evolve and grow and his career blossom. We're very lucky to have him as a visiting artist, Guadalupe Maravilla.
Hello, thank you for coming and for the invitation. I'm just going to start off with a video first, and then we're going to get into it because my work has a lot of layers. This is a audience participatory performance. So if you're frustrated with our political climate, I want to hear some yelling. Okay, so when I lift my hands like this, that's the cue. performance is what I consider a new mythology that I create. It took place in Austin, Texas, a couple of months right after Trump took office, and it was held in the parking garage of the GOP headquarters, where all these laws are being passed against against the immigrants on the border. So I wanted to bring awareness and kind of disrupt the place, but also at the same time, I actually wanted to decolonize the space by using sound. I use a lot of sound therapy in my own for my own personal healing, which I'll get into in a little bit. But in this case, use the architecture of like the steel and the concrete to amplify the sound of the motorcycles. And the motorcyclist it's a all-feminist motorcycle gang from Austin, Texas. From San Antonio, Texas. Ladies on Wheels is what, and they're just like a feminist motorcycle gang that's been around for a while, and they're friends of mine. In addition, I had basically everyone involved were immigrants that had, for example, like the sign language interpreters. They just had lost their health insurance because of the new laws. Quinceañeras are also like they're depicted here, and they were showing their power moves. In addition, there was like two immigrant Tibetan throat singers that had just or displaced because of some of the laws that had been completely changed. And then myself, along with the entire team that I always work with. They're usually immigrants, and in some cases they're undocumented, but not during the live performances. And that was this new mythology. And basically, our bodies are over 70% water. And I use sound to kind of release all the toxins that are in the body, like in the water. So that was just like a release of the stress that was happening, and it's currently still going for a lot of us. This is a photograph of a performance I did in 2011. And for this performance, I decided to cross the border for the second time in my life. But this time I wanted to go in reverse. So I tried to cross from Rio Dosa, Texas, into Mexico. But I wanted to wear this elaborate headdress. And the idea was very simple. Was to wear this reflective headdress and reflect light into the river as a type of ceremony for all the lives that have been lost in the river, in the Rio Grande. In this part of Texas, Mexico, the Rio Grande is the border. I got a Marfa radio, which is several hours away from the border, and I talked about my project. Little did I know that Border Patrol was listening, so this 3-hour drive turned into a 28-hour drive because Border Patrol stopped me, I think, 24 times in total. They knew I was going to have this performance at the border, and they did everything to intimidate me from pulling this off. My friend who was next to me, and she's black, and at some point they threatened to deport her, right? So they were just very aggressive and very frightening. And I had my passport with me and everything. I'm a U.S. citizen now. But they did everything possible to intimidate us. So for the performance, there was a small crowd of people waiting for us to see the performance. There was 2 helicopters and 6 Border Patrol officers in a couple cars. They were being really intimidating, and they were threatening to even shoot me at some point, right? Luckily for me, there was a rich Texas guy with a giant hat, and his wife had all this beautiful jewelry. And Border Patrol, they were very surprised that they were there. And they asked, they were in front of me, so they asked him, what are you doing here? And they were like, oh, we're here to support the arts. We want to see this artist do this performance. The minute they said that, I literally saw the helicopters disappear. Border Patrol officers got in the cars and they left. And I was able to go and do the ceremony, right, with the candles, light the candles and reflect light into the river. It was like, so I was able to pull off the piece. I was going to do it regardless of whether Border Patrol was there or not, and that was going to add another element to the piece. So mainly the thing was to keep cameras rolling, right? So that was kind of like the performance. Just to give you guys a little background, like I was born in El Salvador, like Cooper said, and I grew up playing in the pyramids of the Maya. Like, right, we have pyramids in El Salvador, very similar to the ones in Mexico, but no one really knows about them because they're ruins. 3/4 of them are covered, and they're still like unearthed. You see the mounds and the steps have been kind of wiped clean, so you can see there's a pyramid under there. So I grew up playing in these pyramids. And for the longest time, like, we don't have the resources like Mexico does to create a museum and preserve everything. So they've been completely looted. There's not a lot of information. I know, like, my ancestry is Mayan, right, to an extent. I'm mestizo because I have, like, black blood and European blood and just everything, right? But majority, I do have indigenous blood. So what happens, all this information gets lost, right? So growing up in these steppes, I remember thinking of what the Mayans looked like. What did they look like? I had no idea. So ever since I was a child, I was always drawing like my own mythological kind of indigenous ancestors, right? And to the point where I started creating my own headdresses when I was doing my BFA, and creating my own rituals and creating new mythologies around my autobiographical experiences. So they also work as sculptures. So this is me wearing one of them, and this is the back of the sculpture, and this is the front, and this one is the Shrine of the Undocumented Children. This one is actually up right now. I have a solo show in New York City right now, at Jack Barrett Gallery. It's up until October 20th if you're around. And this is a small detail of it. And also, a lot of my work has to do with border politics, but also healing and cancer. 7 years ago, I had stage 3 colon cancer and almost didn't make it. So how I tie everything together is that during that phase, I actually did two surgeries, radiation, chemotherapy, but I also work with shamans from all over the world, from Tibet, from Korea, from China, from Israel, Native Americans, from Mexico, from Central America, from the Amazon, Ecuador, Bolivia, Brazil, and I learned about all these ancient ways of healing. I learned about a lot of different types of plant medicine, a lot of different types of rituals, and to me, I was very clear that Western medicine got rid of my tumor. Actually, the chemotherapy did nothing to the tumor, but the radiation destroyed the tumor, but it also damaged my body tremendously in the process. So in order to heal from like the trauma of just being told that you have cancer, having cancer, and the toxins that were in my body, I did a lot of plant medicine to help me get over this. In the process, I've learned about sound therapy as well. And so like you see these gongs that are on top of that, on top of the headdresses. There's one actually on top of here too, is behind there. I use a lot of sound therapy by using these gongs as part of healing for myself or whoever that needs it. I actually have a healing center, and I'll get into that a little bit later. In this case, the headdresses all have these anatomical body parts that represents the cancers that have been in my families or just friends. And this is actually an anatomical body part of the breast, and like you see the cancerous tumors on top. So I'm in the process of making 12 of these right now. This is actually my show at the ICA Museum in Miami right now. I have a solo show there that's up till November 24th. And this is another headdress that's there. So they're about 8 feet tall right now. Making some new ones that are 16 feet tall. And they're going to be worn by multiple people. I can no longer wear these alone anymore. I need like 3 people to wear them. These are some embroideries that I make out of my drawings. This is another one, and it has the lungs. And this one has a frog. Basically, I use cambo, which is a 2,000-year-old medicine from the Amazon to get rid of the chemotherapy that was in my body. Basically, what that is the indigenous people from the Amazon have learned to reset the body by applying poison from this giant tree frog that lives in Brazil. So they pretty much capture the frog, they extract its arms and legs, and when it gets threatened, it releases poison from its back. They gently remove the poison and let the frog go, and then they apply it to your skin. They burn your skin and they apply the poison, and it resets the body. And literally, it's like 45 minutes of the most ill I've ever been. Chemotherapy is nothing in comparison. You get fever, you get cold, you get hot, you're vomiting. It's just the worst experience, but it resets the body. And that's how I got rid of a lot of the toxins that I had in my body really quickly. And that's the headdress. This is a shrine for the frog. And this is kind of like what the exhibition looks like right now. There's about 5 headdresses in the show. And I'll talk later about the drawing in the back. Last summer, I was in an exhibition at the Whitney Museum, and these are collaborative drawings. And these drawings are actually this game Tripachuca that I grew up playing in El Salvador. And basically, you put pairs of numbers on a piece of paper, in this case, a wall, and 2 people play, and they alternate numbers. So I'm number 1, Cooper's number 2. I got to connect my number 1 to another number 1, and then Cooper goes 2 to 2. The only rule is you can't touch any lines. So it starts to form this pattern. And I play this game with someone who's undocumented, and we talk about our stories, and we share our experiences of the migration, right? And so in this case, I created a mural at the Whitney. It was a 42-foot mural along with some other drawings that I had, which also had the Tripachuca game on it. And the images that you're seeing there are actually, so a lot of the work that I'm doing with the headdresses and the drawings, now that I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm going back and I'm retracing my migration path. I went from El Salvador through Honduras to Guatemala, through Mexico. It was a 2.5-month journey by land with coyotes without my parents. And so now what I'm doing is I'm going back to these cities that I remember, and I get objects and I make sculptures with them. So a lot of the things that you saw on the headdresses, they're brought from Mexico. In this case, I started retracing my migration on the internet, and I found these 16th century manuscripts, Historia Tolteca Chichimeca, and there are these drawings made by priests of what was happening in these regions of Mexico that I kind of migrated through. And I find it really interesting because a lot of these images that, the original ones, they talk about displacement. There's river crossings, there's mountain crossings, there's footprints everywhere. So it just shows a lot of displacement because of the colonization. The Native Americans of those spaces were being tortured and displaced in a different way. So I found a lot of similarities to that. And here we are. I'm playing Tripachuca with one of my DACA recipient students after everything is printed. So what I do is I grab the maps and I take all the images apart, and I kind of I make a new composition out of them, and then I draw Tripachuca on them. So part of that exhibition, I had the great opportunity to also perform at the Whitney. And I did this performance, the OG of the Undocumented Children. And what I'm doing right now is I make what I call these new mythologies, but I get my hand on everything. I come up with the idea, I hire everyone, I make sure everyone is paid by the museums. I create all the costuming that happens. In this case, I actually hired a band from Mexico City, La Rubia Tevesa, and we flew them over, and I wrote a whole musical score with them. So basically, these performances are turning into these little mini operas that I'm the director and I star in them. So there's a lot of character development too, based on my autobiographical kind of experiences. And I'll just talk about the first character for this performance, and this one is called La Momia. And I'll play a little video where it kind of originated from.
La momia. Luchador sordomudo. Es más fuerte que el acero. Es el paladín de la justicia. La momia. Protege a los buenos. Última lucha de esta reunión. Por el cinturón de oro. Por el título de campeón del mundo. La momia es justiciera. La momia.
So growing up, that's one of the wrestlers that I used to kind of look up to, and the lyrics always stuck by me because the lyrics talk about like he's the protector of the children. He defends them from the bad guys, right? And this performance happened almost like the same time we found out about that we were holding Central American children in cages, right? So that's why the name comes from the OG of the undocumented children. So I used that as my inspiration to create this character, who's La Momia, and I'll talk more about her after this clip. was a 5-minute clip of an hour and 20-minute long performance. These are some of the characters that were in the performance. This is a family of undocumented vampire immigrants that only drink blood of Americans. And this is an 8-year-old girl that represents me at the age when I crossed. I also had a couple of futuristic coyote border crossers that had Dyson vacuums that were to cleanse the energy of the Whitney Museum before entering. There's a band, there's also quinceañeras, but now they're wearing black and because they're mourning. I also locked myself in a cage and I told the story in detail for 30 minutes on how I crossed the border when I was 8 years old. After I told the story, I invited anyone that would be interested in joining me in the cage to see if I can withdraw blood from their neck, to see if I was a real vampire, an immigrant vampire. Let's see if I'm here to steal your jobs. Let's see if I'm here to steal everything that you have. The immigrants are sometimes called vampires. So in this case, I asked anyone if they can offer me their neck. If I don't suck your blood, then I'll leave you a hickey. In this case, I left several hickeys. So that was part one. So basically, this is a trilogy. That performance at the Whitney was part one. This one is part two. This happened a couple months ago at the Queens Museum. And a lot of characters are going to be kind of, these coyotes are still involved into the mix. And this one happened at the Queens Museum's New York City Panorama, which is kind of like which is such an honor to perform on that floor. No one had ever performed in that space. And it's basically a replica of New York City. It's almost like a city block in size. It's like this massive replica of New York City, and I got the permission to walk on the water of the space. And for this performance, I told the story of how my life was being undocumented and the deportations that happened in my family. And this also happened during the time when all the raids were happening, or the raids were announced. I'm currently working on part 3 of this series, and that's going to be at the Knockdown Center in March 15, 2020. And for this is also happening. This is actually in New York City as well. And for that, I'm actually making a 22-foot inflatable, my digestive system with a tumor, and I'm going to have a conversation with it, along with like 30 other performers, and this really complex mythology that I'm creating right now. This is my project Spirit Level. And this is, earlier this year, I got a Soros grant, and I was able to create a healing center for undocumented immigrants in New York City. And what this is basically how I connect cancer to my border crossings, because after all the spiritual work that I did with all those shamans and healers and curanderos from all over the world, I learned that the cancer came from the traumas that I had, and I held them in my gut, and that manifested into a cancerous tumor, right? So in addition to everything that's happening in the world right now, I think about what's happening to these people that are in detention, these children that are in cages separated from their families, what's happening to their mental health, to their physical health. So I was able to create this healing center where I do a lot of sound therapy myself, and I invite practitioners from all types, like someone doing acupuncture to the group, to teaching them how to meditate, how to do yoga, how to stretch. I bring nutritionists, herbalists, mycologists, people in the city of New York that talk to us about how to obtain organic produce at an affordable price. And so we had these workshops. And at the end, I hire a Salvadoran chef that comes and cooks for us, and we sit in a circle, and we talk about what we learned and what we're struggling with, like in personal life or just like with their bodies, right? And a lot of them have illnesses already. It's been going for like 7 months straight. It's been very successful. The majority of the participants are older women from like 50s and 60s. Some are 70 years old, and they bring in their millennial grandchildren or children to join us, and it's been very, very fruitful. And I had a conversation with someone earlier too. Like, it's really important for me, I think it's like really hard to separate the artist from the person, right? So like for me, like it's like, what else can I do? Like, all right, I'm doing everything as much as I can with my work, but how can I give back to the community that I'm like really talking about? And I'm gonna finish off with another short video. And this was my Creative Capital project. And I'll talk about it right afterwards.
I'm here to tell you a story today. A story how I became undocumented. The coyote came over one night at 3 in the morning and said, okay, it's your turn. He put me in the back of his car and he said, just pretend to be my son. Maybe we'll get through. The night came, it was dark, there was no traffic. The coyote took me in the back of his car with his white dog. When we got to the border patrol, the big fluffy dog just sat and covered me. And the coyote said, do not move. I can't see you. Border patrol looked at us, didn't even question there was anyone in the back. This is how I got to this country. I remember seeing American flags in the San Diego border.
Yo no necesito sangrar a nadie. No necesito sangrar a nadie.
So this is a short film that I'm working on right now. It's just a little trailer. And basically I got this Creative Capital grant 2016, and this is why I used the money to travel and work with other healers from all over the world. And in the process, I made a short film. So I'm in the process of editing and finishing it right now. So I'm just gonna leave it off with that. Thank you. I'm here if anyone has